just kind of, when we were looking at data before we got here, was it making sense? Was what we were seeing, some of the conversations, were they matching up with some of the conversations that we were having early on? So I asked people what they really loved about, this group of people, what they really loved about living on Beech Mountain, being a part of this community, and I created a little word cloud. This is not scientific in any way, shape, or form. I need you to really, like, it's not Aaron's level of data. It's me going, yep, that's what they said. So just like, if this resonates with you, then maybe you're also seeing yourself in some conversations that we've had. And if you want to leave more about what you love about Beech Mountain, what you want to preserve, that's why we have those big boards with sticky notes. Please leave as much as you can there. We'll have other opportunities. And then the next thing that we were talking about big ideas, because one of the things that Aaron is going to bring to the table, and which is fascinating, is in these big ideas we were talking about what do you see as some things you would like to see in Beech Mountain. And we also talked about challenges too, but they're not as fun to put up on a graphic because we're still talking about those. But you'll see that these themes kind of came out. Yes, fine. These themes kind of came out, and that's what the themes around the boards were of when we started collecting data, just to say, like, this is what we're hearing. So it's, transforming Beech Mountain to not just a resort, but a destination, something you want to come to year round. Circulation and parking, that's going to be the key to the commercial center's success. Heard that for the last couple of days too. And then we need to really, and we're talking about it here with housing, balancing the needs of those who work here with those who visit here. And then a big component that came out in all 5 conversations was somewhere for the community to gather. Like, we have the rec center, there are, you have places that you're meeting up, but can we make that, can this be a part of that town center, like a place for the community to gather? Walkable community, we've been talking about that. That came up before we said anything here in this room. As well as that people want to build on what's already here. We really love what's here. There's no reason to, take that away, but let's build up. And so it's one of the reasons the boards are out there. It's one of the reasons, like, if you don't feel like you have enough time to talk, leave us something here today so that we can take it back. But you also have other ways. In a couple of weeks, I'm going to say somewhere around the 15th, we're going to put out an online survey. We hope that you will, 1, take the survey, and then 2, share that survey wide and far. The people you know that come up that are just seasonal residents, that are your friends, if you are with groups that market to tourists, share it with your email list. We're looking for everybody's comments, not just one particular sector. That'll be up for about 6 weeks before we come back, because we want to take that data and be able to present it to you again in July to say, because not everybody's in the room right now. And not everybody can be in this room because it only holds so many because of fire code. But we want to make sure that we are collecting information. So that is a very short segue to get the data man back up here. Yes, Sam.
You want us to disseminate this to other people, but they don't have the benefit of what we've been hearing for the last 2 days. Are you going to make some of these slides and information, the data, available?
We're gonna discuss that of what we're gonna put online. But the questions that we're asking are probably not that, like, they're not based on the data. It's more about how you feel, what do you need, how do you get around, those kinds of things. So you won't necessarily need the data to answer any of the questions.
Maybe not the data, but the alternatives, some of the ideas that are being floated. I would like them to be able to see those.
They're recording all these.
Yeah, so they can.
People can.
Yeah, they're all being recorded through the town website, just like the town council meetings are recorded. You can watch them at your leisure.
Yeah.
We want to make sure that this information is available, just like the lady that missed the infrastructure meeting yesterday. She can then say, okay, so they talked for an hour and a half about infrastructure. What'd they say? Well, you can watch it. And then when you come to the next meeting, you're in the know. The worst thing that can happen is people come. And they say, I didn't know we were having these meetings. I don't know what's going on here. So I don't want it. you know, that kind of stuff, so.
I'm gonna get your question, but we certainly could put a slide package together and have that at the website, so if somebody just wants to, like, go scroll through those slides, we'll have that available.
The question is it going on the town center, or on this, the Town of Beech Mountain Center, or as a PDA? Because there was nothing about this meeting on the townofbeechmountain.com.
That is for Apple.
There is.
Yeah, there was. That's
On the
fine.
homepage, it's on the front. Scheduled for every page, right on the homepage.
Man, I just,
It's in a little box, scroll down.
So, yeah, so we'll, but it will be through the town, it won't be a website that, a separate website that is through us, it will be through the town, so that should, so we wanted it in a place where you can, since you already go for information, so that it won't, so you don't have to take an extra step. So, all right,
I called.
take it away.
Well, first question, who was not in the last meeting where we started talking about housing? Okay, there are a few people in there. Those same slides are in here. I'm just gonna hit, for everybody that was here, when we go to those slides, I'm gonna hit the high notes of those, so we won't go into as deep of a dive. And if y'all have any questions about it afterwards, feel free to ask me, the folks with that. So, again, my name's Aaron Arnett, and we're on a team to look at economics and market opportunity. You know, what makes sense for Beech Mountain as a whole, but also more specifically, you know, our commercial district that we're doing this master plan for. You know, when we're looking at a number of things from, you know, housing and residential to, and all the different layers to that we just talked about, to commercial retail, to dining, to talked about lodging in terms of short-term rentals, and employment, the whole 9 yards. We're looking at everything just to kind of understand what those opportunities happen to be. So I'm gonna really go a little bit deeper into what we talked about last time, specifically talking about what is our market, who's coming here from a local market standpoint, and patronizing our businesses as well as a visitor standpoint. And then, in turn, what are some of those key commercial opportunities that there's demand for right now here in the community? So the first thing is to answer the question about trade areas that was asked before, and I said, hold on, we'll talk about that. That is the trade area itself. So, you know, there's two different markets here. There's a visitor market and there is a local market. The local market, as y'all heard me say in the last meeting, doesn't stop at the town limits. And it really sort of covers a geography that expands within our area. That's not the only market, of course, but it is an incredibly important market. In any community, even the most visitor-oriented of communities, they see with their local businesses that at least 50% of their market, their bread and butter market year-round, is people that exist in these local trade areas. So that's why it's really important for us to understand what those trade areas are, and therefore and in turn, what those opportunities are, because those are the types of businesses and activities that sustain your community over time. So, back to that, the way that we define this trade area is we took Placer data, and I'm sure many folks in the room are familiar with Placer, and some folks aren't. Placer basically is the service that tracks your devices. It doesn't give data to tell me that it's you. It gives me data to tell me what zip code you live in. But it tracks consumer patterns when they come into a place, when they come through a place, when they go from place to place within a community, where they're coming from, where they're going to, as they come into that area. So what we looked at is really the commercial core. We drew a boundary around that area that captures most of what we're talking about, really focusing our design efforts on, and looked at Placer data over the past year. And basically what we looked at was people that came here from April 1st of 2024 to March 31st of this year, when I pulled that data, and people that were in that district for greater than 10 minutes. Now that could have been folks that stopped at a business. It could have been people that work at Town Hall. It could be people that are enjoying the Sledding Hill. It could also be people that are in a traffic jam on Martin Luther King weekend, just waiting to get up the mountain, right? But it's not just people, for the most part, that are truly passing through. So during that time, last year in this district that we're talking about here, there were 462,000 unique visits that came during that time. And that represented over 200,000 unique visitors. So granted, there may be somebody that works in town hall and they're gonna be counted every single day that they're working there. And that's important because I want to understand not just the number, the unique numbers. I wanna know really the breadth of the depth of the market overall. That's 3,295 unique zip codes. So that's 28604, and then 3,294 other zip codes across the country that are represented in this. All 50 states during the year, including DC, was collected. Now, a question might come to your mind about why did this show, foreign countries. Placer doesn't have that data. I think it probably has something to do with telecom agreements, and I don't really know the real deal, but they just only use United States data. So we know there's lots of folks from other countries that are coming here as well. The top areas, North Carolina, just under 50%. Again, this is year round. This isn't during the ski season. Hold that thought because I've got that data later. Next is Florida. Next is Tennessee, and then South Carolina. Within this specific district. This is a heat map right here that kind of shows where they're coming from. You can see a lot of the area, that red area, people are coming from this local region. Then you got Charlotte over here, you got Piedmont Triad there, you've got Raleigh-Durham over there, and then, actually there's some red areas in Florida as well if I zoomed out. About 14% are from the two counties that are here, and about 8% are from that primary zip code. So that is the raw numbers. So what does this mean in terms of that local trade area? One of the things that's interesting, and you can see it on this map here. I can't talk my hands that way. All right, okay, here we go. Here we go. All right, so you can see on this map that each one of these shapes are zip codes. And every zip code is different in terms of geography and the size, the area of it, as well as the population. So what we do is we look at the visits that happen within our district per zip code, and we analyze them based on visits per 1,000 population. I won't go into a whole lot of detail on that, but when we do that, there are very specific breaks in those numbers that tell us what that local market geography happens to be. And for all intents and purposes, what you see up here, the orange trade area, the orange area is your primary trade area. This is your absolute bread and butter market for your businesses that you have in the community. That's the 3 zip codes of, gosh, I don't have them listed here, sorry. But the 3 zip codes that begins with 28604, and obviously it includes our area. You can see Beech Mountain there, and it goes a little bit further out to the west, and actually 37697, I think is what that says, is in Tennessee. So part of our local market is actually in Tennessee. 10% of all of our visits last year into our district came from that primary trade area. Our secondary trade area is the purple area. The purple area is still a loyal local customer base, but those folks live a little bit further away, and they have a choice of when they're going out to eat one day of whether they can come here into Beech Mountain or whether they're going to somewhere else that's close to them as well. And that's an additional 7 zips, and that's about 3% of the population.
Maybe how far away the purple ones are? Is that 50 miles, 100 miles?
Oh no, gosh no, it's It's three or four zip codes away, so it's probably less than 50 miles. It's probably 25 or 30. I mean, I can answer that question for you later, I don't know it right now. But this is not, that's not a local trade area when you're talking about 50 or 100 miles away. That's more of a regional or visitor trade area.
So you're within, so you're within an
Hour and a half.
Hour and a half drive.
Burnsville is right there.
Yeah, hour and a half drive.
So that's Burnsville?
Spruce Pine.
That's Spruce Pine. So, yeah, so I look at the numbers, but yes, what I showed was about an hour-ish drive to the far reaches of the secondary trade area. But anyway, we also did a tertiary trade area. I'm not gonna really share much data with that, but just to say that that's an area where you actually are performing fairly well. I wouldn't go so far as to say they're part of your local loyal market, but you're relevant to them. You're relevant to Boone, you're relevant to Blowing Rock. That is an area that really, comes into our community quite frequently. They're just not that primary and secondary trade area, that bread and butter market. Now, the important thing about this, and you've heard me say this multiple times, your market does not end at the town limits. These areas here, particularly the orange and purple areas, that's an extremely important market, as important as a visitor market, because those are the ones that are gonna sustain our businesses year round, okay? That's why we do this. So, demographics. This survey, or this we showed in the last meeting, so I just did highlights. Your population, you're a small town, you're 681 people as of 2023, it's probably pushing 700 right now. Your income levels are this green bar. This is regional median household income. You have the highest income within this larger region. And I looked at multiple counties, towns, and zip codes around those. In terms of growth, our main zip code, 28604, is projected to grow faster than the entire region over the next 5 years. That's really important, because a lot of times when we do this in other rural areas, you're different obviously than any place, but we do a lot of work in Western North Carolina, Southwest Virginia, where it's rural, y'all are rural, but where they're declining in population. And what that means is your market is contracting, right? There's an opportunity that I'll share with those places and say, this is what your market is today, but we have to understand that it's shrinking. So if we want this to grow, we gotta get more bodies in our community. You're growing, that's awesome, you're growing faster than the rest of the region. Then we went into housing, and the highlights here, again, is if we look at our occupied home values, that middle chart right there, you all, again, are in the upper end of the region in terms of that, at a median value of 421,000. Again, really good, positive indicator, particularly for any potential business that we might have here in the community. One thing that we do know that we talk about more than we will here in the last meeting is close to 80% of your existing households are seasonal or second homes. They're Airbnb, short-term rental, seasonal second homes in the area. So that's what I shared the last time. Now we're going to go back into the deeper dive. So one of the main reasons why we identify what these trade areas is to figure out what the local demand is for goods and services in the area, and particularly retail, particularly dining. And the main study that we look at is we look within our trade areas. We look within our primary trade area, those 3 zip codes. We look within our secondary trade area, those additional 7 zip codes. We also compare that to the town limits itself. And we compare, it's a retail leakage study, and we compare what, within that, say, primary trade area, what the stores are selling on an annual basis. We compare that to the people that live in that primary trade area, what they purchase on an annual basis. If residents that live in that area are purchasing a lot more than the stores in that trade area are selling, dollars are leaking. Dollars are going outside of that trade area because, for many reasons, but the main reason by far and away is because that particular good or service isn't located in that area. And on the one hand, you might say, well, we've got all this leakage, we're not meeting the needs of our local market, and that's true. But on the other hand, when we're doing a project like this, that leakage translates directly to demand. And this tells us, it's writing on the wall, what types of businesses we can support here. So within our, within Beech Mountain, we know there's not a whole lot of business here, and most of that we do have is seasonal. And because of that, virtually all of our dollars are leaking. You know, if we want to go if we want to go get groceries, we can certainly go down to Fred's. But if we want to do, you know, if we want to go to a conventional grocery store, we got to go down the road a little bit. Those sorts of things. You know, if we want to do general merchandising, we can go to Fred's. But if we, you know, want to do, you know, other types of shopping, we have to go into other places. Within your primary trade area, that's the most important number. Last year, stores sold $327 million. Residents spent $409 million. So there's $82 million of demand last year in the primary trade area. The secondary trade area, it's also leaking. There's $249 million in demand in that area. So, what does that mean in terms of, you know, that's just all commerce, all retail and all dining. But I do break that down into about 70 different categories. And some of the key categories are shown here on this chart. And you can see, I don't normally look at this. A lot of times we're doing downtown master plans and, you know, for example, I look at things like auto dealerships. There may be plenty of demand, and there probably is here in the community, but is that the kind of business that we want in a commercial district? No. Well, quite often, in communities are like, well, I don't care about gas stations. We have gas stations outside of our downtown. Well, obviously that's not the case here. So I looked at gas and convenience because that's something that has been mentioned over and over again, and I can look at Google and see there's not a gas station here in town.
Used to be.
Well,
Used to be.
well, last
They're
year,
out of business. Well, they used to be all those things.
right.
Yeah.
Well, last year, your primary trade area leaked nearly $12 million in sales in gas stations. And the secondary trade area also leaked that much. So this tells me, yeah, you know what, there is demand for that. Some of the other categories, the key categories, clothing. Now that one I break down into women's clothing, family's clothing, men's clothing, a number of different categories as well, so we can get into a finer grain of detail. Health and personal care, so that would include things, you know, like a private independent pharmacy as well as a CVS or Walgreens or something like that. Some of these categories are somewhat broad. Restaurants, there's demand for that here, and there's demand for restaurants in our primary and secondary trade area in both full service restaurants, which would be your sit down type restaurants like you primarily have here in the community, as well as limited service restaurants where you might order at the counter or maybe even fast food. There's demand for both of those, and hold that because I've got some more specifics a little bit later. Electronics and appliances, drinking places. Someone mentioned, I saw a comment online about, I hope this effort's not an opportunity for us to get more bars in our community or any bars in our community, and that's not the reason why we're here, but there's demand for those types of things. Do we want it? We might not want it, right? But there's opportunity for it. Shoe stores, furniture stores, that's an interesting one. Furniture, there is demand for furniture here. You've got some nice furniture stores in your area, within even the primary trade area. And there's still demand for it, but you're also in an area where there's growth, there's high-end housing, there's tons of construction, and usually those actually generate that demand when you're in an area like that. So that was interesting to me. Sporting goods, and that's not like ski rental, that's like, you know, an outfitter or, you know, ball sports and things of that nature. There's demand for that. Specialty food, there is a little bit of demand for grocery. Jewelry stores and a number of other different sort of specialty categories show demand. So again, this is just the total demand. Now, we do what we call a capture scenario, where by a community, you're never going to recapture 100% of what's leaving your area. You're gonna continue to shop online, which, by the way, this does account for those, any purchases online. So when you see a demand number, it's like, well, I do all my shopping on Amazon. Well, that's accounted for here. That's okay. This is still based on top of that. People are gonna continue to do that. People are gonna continue to shop when they go visit some other place. They're gonna continue to go over to Blowing Rock, once a month to Walmart or something like that. You're not gonna change those patterns 100%, but through economic development, through business recruitment, through marketing and promoting our businesses that we have in an area, you can recapture much of what's leaving your trade areas. We do a relatively conservative scenario where we look at getting just 20% recapture of what's leaving the orange area, the primary trade area. So just one in every $5. And getting 10% of what's leaving the purple area, so one in every $10. And then we can translate that into actual square footage of commercial space that there's demand for right here. And that's what I have on the next slide. This accounts for retail leakage in the previous 12 months, as well as projected demand over the next 5 years, what I'm getting ready to show you.
And these are the top 12?
They are they are the key 12, let's say, because there's something, like Alder dealerships was probably one of the highest ones, but these are the key 12. We intentionally do a conservative analysis at this, and I think that's really important for your community, because one of the things that drives demand is a critical mass of business. Y'all do not have that right now. So we wanted to particularly err on the side of being conservative. So the reality is the demand I'm getting ready to share with you, the opportunity is probably greater than this. But based on that conservative scenario, we show a capture rate, looking at those key categories that rightfully might be accommodated in our downtown commercial district, those types of businesses. We project between 101,000 square feet to 152,000 square feet in capture. And again, that's kind of the low end, right? It's probably more than that. And just as a frame of reference, I use this because everybody's kind of familiar with it, and obviously we would never suggest that you get a Walmart here, but a super Walmart's 250,000 square feet. So, you're 1 point something of Walmart that there's demand for here in your community. Small town, we've got a small population within our trade areas. Even though 150,000 square feet doesn't sound like a lot, I think it really is a not insignificant amount of demand here in your community that could be captured within our commercial district. But also, again, and I know I'm repeating myself, but keep in mind that's sort of the low end. Because as we start to cultivate these businesses here, as we start to build those critical masses, as we start to make Beech Mountain more of a year-round destination that we will have with those types of businesses, collectively, that demand's actually going to grow. So the key categories, you probably already looked at them there. The ones that really are probably enough of a store size, furniture, I mentioned that, there was demand for that. There's over 4,000 square feet of opportunity for that here in this community. Electronics, that's a weird category because I doubt you get electronic stores because those things have pretty much died. But there are independent electronic stores in many of the communities where we work, but that's a really transitioning category there. It used to be that you'd have the independent Radio Shacks in your communities, and that doesn't even exist anymore. I mean, even Circuit Cities have closed, and Best Buy's struggling. But anyway, that's beside the point.
Pardon, is this in addition to what was already here?
Yes.
Is this an add-on?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Good question. And that's where restaurants comes in. So bear with me on that here too. So next is grocery. A lot of times we come into a community and say, we got to have a grocery store. We got to have a grocery store. We got to have a grocery store. And usually when I work in rural communities, there's not enough demand for that. And there's not enough demand for a conventional food line style grocery store because on the low end, that's gonna be 35,000 square feet. But, and that's a small food line. Here, there is about over 10,000 square feet of demand. We know we can go get great groceries over at Fred's, but there's opportunity to grow that. It might be Fred's expanding into, that market, that merchandising, or it might be, hey, an independent grocer we've seen be very successful in communities that need that. And to the scale of 10,000 square feet, that would sort of meet that scale. Then you look at things like clothing stores. That happens to be really the largest of it, over 20,000 square feet of opportunity. The vast majority of that is in family clothing stores, so there's not any demand, and I never see this, honestly, for men's clothing. I mean, there's not sufficient demand. A lot of times we see more demand for women's clothing, and there's not, it's not a major portion of this. It is, there definitely could be a women's shop that would locate here based off demand, but most of this is in family clothing. Then you see other categories like sporting goods stores. There's enough demand for sporting goods stores, and I already alluded to that. That's not just, that does not, in fact, include ski rentals, but it would include things like an outdoor outfitter, a place where you could go and buy camping gear, hiking gear, backpacks, kayaks, or a basketball, a baseball bat, those sorts of things. And, there's layers to each one of these categories. There's opportunity for that here. The next one is, when it says other miscellaneous store retailers, that's a really broad category, but it includes a lot of specialty type retail. It might be pet stores, it might be art supplies, it might be candle shops. A lot of specialty categories are sort of lumped into that. There's an opportunity for that here. And then you see restaurants. That's actually the largest demand within our trade areas. 25,000 square feet. That's a lot. If you think about it, a typical independent restaurateur. Y'all have got some larger restaurants here because and they are all mostly, not all, but they're mostly seasonal. Usually independent restaurants range from about 2,500 maybe upwards to maybe a bigger one, a 5,000 square foot footprint. So even at that high level, there's demand for 5 restaurants here in this community. And then you might ask that question about, well, half of our businesses, restaurants close during the seasonal time. Well, all of them, for the most part, are, part of a seasonal business as well. So the point is there's demand for it. Now, another thing about this, and I thought I had it on here, maybe on a future slide, is this is broken down into full service restaurants and limited service restaurants. I think I mentioned that before. Much of this demand is in limited service. I think about 4,000 square feet is full service, which would be most of the businesses that you already have here. Okay?
So when you're thinking about this demand, is that including local demand and tourism demand? Or when you think, when I hear clothing store, when I think tourism demand, I think really cute boutique, but when I think local demand, I think practical clothing.
That's a great question. And the answer to that is there's 2 sides to this. One is the store sales side. That 100% captures everybody. Visitors, locals, regional people, everyone. The other is the trade area purchases. The people that live in the trade area, what they purchase. That's just local demand. So, again, when we go back to this being a conservative scenario, this really is something that's it's probably greater than this. All these numbers are probably greater in terms of opportunity. Now, a caveat to that is we know that the visitors here, and I'll show you in a couple slides from now, it's incredibly seasonal. It's significant. Y'all know this. I'm going to confirm what you know with some data here in a second. So that's something that's really important. The other thing is we can't down to this grain. We can look at how much visitors spend when they come into our community. It's typically gonna be on dining, retail, and, lodging. Maybe convenience like gas, but what it's not gonna do is break it down into all of these categories. That's one of the key reasons why we're doing the survey. The survey will be for locals to do, but it will also be distributed as best we can to the visitor markets that we're connected to already in this community, because they're not here right now, but we wanna make sure we hear from them, and that survey is a big piece of that, and that will help inform, okay, what's that visitor demand as well. So anyway, those are all the different categories. You can see the smaller ones, like say bookstore, 664. Again, if you want a book, you can go down to Fred's and you can, they've got a book section there. So that's really important. But these numbers, these smaller numbers, let's say less than 1,500, 1,000 square feet, those really show opportunities for us to maybe an existing business to grow, whether it's expanding into different merchandising or whatnot. So that's it. You can see the overall demand, and I know you'll have some questions about that, but let me kind of get through. We also talked about the short-term rental market, and I'll just say for those of you who weren't here earlier, there's a lot of short-term rental here. We talk about close to 80% being seasonal housing of our households in Beech Mountain proper. This data basically shows that there's a market for it here. It's a very profitable market here. And that's important for us to understand, because when we're talking about particularly housing, two things, housing potential, the market is telling us right now, hey, it's so easy for us to invest in a single family home and put it on short-term rental market. If we want something else like workforce housing, more attainable, affordable housing, that's something that we're gonna have to manage throughout this process, or else the market will flip it to something else. But it's very profitable, it's very prolific in this area. Well,
I'm sorry, this is actually about the last slide, but when we did that, and you mentioned the Walmart example that I really like, that helped me understand it. But when we were talking about that like quarter-mile walk of 5 minutes and saw those like nice overlays, how would that kind of project into this? Or how would this project into that?
I mean, I think that from a design standpoint, that's a TBD. Let's say it this way. That quarter-mile, whatever walking area from the main commercial study area we're looking at, that's a receiving area. That's where some of this, probably not all of this, could be accommodated. Because most likely, within that area, when we get through this master plan and whatever the vision happens to be, there's going to be commercial, there's gonna be residential, there's definitely gonna be destinations like the sledding hill and other things of that nature. Can you fit all of that within that half-mile area, including the 150,000 square feet of retail and dining? Probably not. So we have to use this to understand what that potential is, and then sort of transition that into the design phase.
Okay, thank you.
You just don't know what the cost of living is up here, and our taxes up here. It's incredible. We have the highest tax in the state of North.
Really, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And we have to take that, and my water bill and sewer bill, one person is $139 a month. And I don't use that, I use less water than on the scale. Right now, we're in stage 2 of a water restriction. And we won't have that done until a couple of years after the town manager, Bob over here, he's in charge and he's great at his job.
And that's a great point, and I appreciate you bringing that up, because these numbers are real numbers. These numbers account for the local economics of the people that live in our area. But particularly when we're talking about development, those infrastructure things in particular that you're talking about will play a key role in design. That's not my area.
Well, and another thing is, the building, we don't have a 4-lane highway in the whole county. You think about that, more people coming in, more traffic. The state won't build us a 4-lane road in every county.
And again, I think that's a great observation, and all I can say is I don't have the answer to that, because I'm looking at.
Well, see, that's gonna depend on
what they need as a profit. So everything they're going to be up in is going to be more expensive than if you go down.
And that very well may be the case, but what I was getting ready to say is that we do have, traffic engineers that are on our team that are looking at transportation, they're looking at connectivity, they're looking at walkability, and they're looking at parking as well. So those things, you know, a 4-lane road in Avery County, we're not gonna be able to solve that problem here in this, but just rest assured that from our local standpoint, no, I hear you loud and clear, but from our local standpoint, we are addressing it in this plan. So,
It's to your advantage, you don't have a 4-lane.
Yes.
The whole thing is
Yes.
really not about you and I as a resident, it's about our tourism and how much money they're gonna come and spend on their one and done at the jewelry store while they're here.
Yep.
So, it's not really, the meeting's not really about the community, it's about.
it's actually, it
It's
really is about
how
that.
many, well, if that's true, then what is gonna set the difference for the businesses that have been here before? All the restaurants that are here, they're not seasonal, they only close for 2 weeks during the season.
A lot of them are, but you're right, all of them
They
are not.
close for 2 weeks in the.
No, I
tourist
got you.
What is gonna make their success different from the businesses that have come and gone for the past 50 years up here? The gas station that we had that's not there, that the building can't be
Because-
sold because of the EPA
Okay, and
on the building.
I'm not being adversarial here, but I will say that just because that gas station failed does not mean there's not demand for a new gas station. I think your comment is a lot more relevant for the restaurants that are here right now.
Well, have you talked to the owners of those restaurants and how profitable they are?
We have not yet.
Exactly.
Well,
Maybe we
again,
should.
I agree with you. We absolutely should. We started this project 2 days ago. And this whole, I mean, I've done this analysis. A lot of this analysis was done weeks and weeks ago, mine. And this is just I'm sharing with you where we are right now. There's lots more data that I'm growing as we go throughout this.
Right.
But a lot of the reasons why we're here this week is to hear from you on what those challenges, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's the competitive market and the existing businesses that struggle at times of year, whether it's the businesses that opened up and failed. The answer to your question, there's not a magic bullet. It's a very complex answer to your question. I can assure you though, that other communities that have success in creating a vision for a district like we're talking about right here and bringing in the types of businesses that we need and growing that critical mass. Believe it or not, as we have a larger critical mass of businesses here, including restaurants, that'll generate more activity in business for existing restaurants because more people are coming here to our community.
And Bob said it really well yesterday. I can't even remember how to paraphrase it well, but we're growing whether we like it or not. It's gonna manage us and we can manage it. And that's what this group's here to help guide us with an idea of best practices. And then the council gets to decide what to do. They're not getting to decide what we do. They're just saying, hey, we've got some great ideas. What do you like?
But it's an excellent question again, and just rest assured that we understand that and we're continuing to build our conversations, whether it be with existing business owners, but also our data sets to where we understand the full picture. And this is part of the picture right now. Yes, sir.
To get back to your retail slide, earlier this morning you were showing pictures of some developments around the East Coast, but I didn't get to see all of them. Did you happen to have a picture of Burkdale Village by any chance?
No, I didn't, but I'm very familiar with Burkdale Village, and certainly my colleagues that live in that area and have worked on a number of developments in that area, extremely familiar with it as well.
The area that the town is currently thinking of doing commercial development is relatively a small footprint, relatively speaking. Burkdale Village is I think a good example of retail and housing
Absolutely.
in a city center in a small footprint.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because Tom and I were just talking about that 2 days ago, when we were talking about Burkdale.
And your comment a few minutes ago about you really need to start building some more retail or some other reasons to come here, I think you're 100% right. Other restaurants and other businesses would benefit if there was more of a reason to come to Beech Mountain on a more regular basis, because right now it's a seasonal hit or miss. But your comment about having more of a core reason to come here would benefit all the restaurants and all the other businesses.
Well, it's smooth out.
Is anybody familiar with, or not familiar with Burkdale? It's pretty complete, look it up, it's a mixed-use development, it's pretty significant, it's in Huntersville, North Carolina, so just north of Charlotte.
If you are familiar with Biltmore Square in Asheville, it's very similar to that.
That's big, though. That's probably double.
Steve has a question here.
Yeah, I think Burkdale is probably, how many, that's probably like, it's probably 500,000.
Yeah, it's a great example of a mixed-use district, but it's at a scale that's not a Beech Mountain scale.
Yeah.
But I get what you're saying.
I'm talking about the concept, not the size.
Yep, of course.
I have a question, like, how do you guys like take into account oversaturation in businesses and stuff? Cause like you put up the Airbnb example, but like every year's kind of different with Airbnb, like some years they have nobody out here renting it, like, how would you like promise that you wouldn't like pretty much just like pull the businesses that are already here?
Well, one of the, I mean, I can't promise that any business is gonna be successful, I would never make that claim. But also, I mean, because some people just frankly, if I opened up a restaurant today, it would fail tomorrow, it doesn't matter how much demand there is. But that's one of the reasons why we look at, as I've mentioned before, we present a very conservative analysis. I know that the opportunity is greater, but I think that conservative look is particularly in this area that we know we have to focus on building that critical mass, that we have to understand that, because when our true opportunity happens is as we start to do that. But to answer your question more specifically, one of the very important things, and y'all can do this, and you know, I can certainly give the town some advice on the tools to do it, but tracking that data over time really helps you understand that, because you mentioned short-term rental, that's one that will fluctuate from year to year, you know, absolutely. So this is a little bit less of that, but absolutely that will happen. But that's a good question. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, culturally, we all have changed in how we shop. I only wish we had Phil Simmons here right now. Our post, delivery man. He actually calls his delivery the store.
Yeah.
Okay? And he multiple, I mean, so many packages, and we have FedEx, and we have all UPS and the whole thing up there. That needs to be addressed too, because the shopping up here, which is your bread and butter
Right.
of all of us, is also leaking out that way.
That's right.
Okay, but how do we get, I mean, I'm sorry, I go to Fred's all the time for what I need, and I always find what I need. And his square footage of what he has, beer and wine, you know, baby items, toilet paper, groceries, ice cream, whether it's scooped or whether it's from the freezer, going for bird food, which you mentioned, you know, and he has a phenomenal bird shop in the spring and summer. All of that, for me.
Hardware.
And hardware too, but I mean, even sweatshirts, clothing,
Yeah,
boots,
that's right,
and shoes, we do have it.
You do.
But it's sustainable.
Well,
It's sustainable because the
yeah.
culture also goes outside of the store of bread, which is a cultural change.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just Beech Mountain that shops Amazon or any
Yeah,
ETSY
so
or
I'd like
any.
to expand on that. The quintessential corner store, or the general store, is something that the suburbs just basically completely forgot. You know, because they have specialty big box stores, you know, they call them category killers. You know, they just suck the life out of small towns, the Walmarts. The third place that I mentioned before, everywhere besides work and home that helps you get through the day. You know, the third places, the great good places. Well, Fred is like, his is a brilliant version of that. He has figured that out, that model is perfect scale. And he basically provides everything. And the first time we realized that was on Seaside, the famous, you know, resort town on the Florida Panhandle. They had a really interesting guy that actually had a food stand on the side of the highway. And he actually said he'd love to have had a place he could, you know, do something like Fred's. And so the town square that they built, first business they put in was called Modica's Market. Modica's Market was a guy named Carmen Modica, and he basically moved in, and he realized that he really understood, because he'd been out there selling, burgers and hot dogs on the side of the road. He understood what people wanted, and he stocked it with all the same stuff, exactly that, and brilliant. And he also, there was a trend back then that people were switching over from shortening to olive oil. Okay, kind of realized that was a good idea, and then it became like, but I have the best olive oil. So he had 32 varieties of olive oil on the shelves in one section as a novelty, and then he sold everything else. Eventually, he didn't need all that, but it was like, oh wow, we have a sophisticated gourmet market that basically sells to our market, and so every new town, every new neighborhood is said, we need that great classic general store that basically you don't have to leave. It captures so many people from having to drive down, like in this case, down the mountain. So you can get it there. And yeah, there's a little bit of a premium of it, but an extra hour of your time, and the gas, and the car maintenance, and et cetera, and the traffic, it's worth it, So it's like absolutely brilliant.
He died and his son is running it now.
Yeah, so it's second generation now.
I have a question. Going back to your statistics.
Can I have one
Oh,
more?
I'm sorry, go ahead, yeah.
Okay, because, so one of the things our charrette team, these brilliant people you see on both sides over here do, the reason why they're all with us is because they're listening to what we have to say. And in some cases, they hear an idea that someone, what we really need, or, where this should go, and immediately they're putting it into their plan drawings. And say, okay, I heard that, so we need to make a space for that. What I was listening to with this presentation is the magic number of how much, what's possible, additional possible square footage. He said between 100,000 and 150,000 square feet, right? That's your main number.
Conservatively,
Okay.
152.
Okay, 150. All right. So what does that look like? Well, he said, yeah, it looks like a large, grocery store, probably about the same size as the original Walmarts, before they became super. Grocery stores are now like 120,000 square. I mean, it was the monster, we call them the Taj Teeters, the Harris Teeters in Charlotte, and so which is the wrong scale, but it's also if you look at, well, how much of a main street is that with shops, small scale shops? And so if you were to take the same kind of small scale shops that are in Blowing Rock and what's a good example? And West Jefferson's a really good example. Those scale buildings, which we know because we studied them, ad nauseum, average about around 50 feet deep. Some of them are deeper, some of them are really shallow, but the average is that. So what you do is you take, let's just say in the average between 100,000, I'm doing quick math for everybody, 100,000 and 150,000, 125,000, right? Because you have a two-sided main street to divide that in half. And then you divide it by 50 feet. Basically, this is just actually a miraculous coincidence. Okay. Let me just close that slide up.
Wrong button.
So I immediately, being the charretter, like all these other folks, I immediately drew that at a scale. Okay, so this is a 1/4 mile walk. Okay, and these are 4 traditional blocks that are about 300 feet long, center around the center line, and these are those 40, 50 foot blocks. What else is this? 1/4 mile, what we've been talking about? A strolling district. This is exactly the right size for a strolling district because it's only a 5-minute walk. And if you actually, I make the numbers might be right, but basically, and that's what I would draw on the picture and make it the numbers right. But basically, this means that there is the potential demand for a strolling district, a really good one. That's basically the same length as Blowing Rock, or probably half of West Jefferson. Just think of the scale of that you know. What do y'all think of that?
Awesome.
It all depends on if you're projections are right with regards to the market.
Are y'all doing the math for me? That needs to be checked.
I've been.
Here's the question, or the comment I was gonna make prior. You just put up that we need 5 more restaurants up here. That's hard for all of us to.
I
accept that.
understand that,
So
understand
my
that.
question is, how does that math work to come up with that? It's just way foreign to all of us that we could have 2 more restaurants be successful.
There's-
Much less 5.
Well, again, as I mentioned before, it's potential. It's potential based off of demand in your trade areas. So I'm not talking
So
about
the
six
demand in
hundred.
the trade area, how do you come up?
I'm not talking about, pardon?
That demand in the trade area, I guess is.
That's the retail leakage study I shared before. And then I know how much each one of those businesses sell per square foot. It's different in a rural area than it is in a suburban area, and so I fine tune that, dial that into a community like Beech Mountain, and that's where those numbers, and definitely don't, and I probably shouldn't put it up there, I should round numbers, because when I say 25,632 square feet of opportunity, don't necessarily dwell on that. Think about the larger picture. It shows that there's opportunity. It shows that there's demand. Will it be a challenge to recruit this stuff? It might be for certain categories like restaurants. As you cultivate those over time, again, that cluster, that walkable district with peer types of businesses will actually augment and create more of that demand and allow you to do it over time. So none of this is to say that just because I've done this analysis, people will be knocking on your door asking to invest in this community. And none of this is to say that this is gonna happen in the next year either. But it informs the vision, and that's the most important thing.
So for us, it's hard to imagine because it's only 5 to 6 weeks out of the year that we have that demand for a restaurant.
Right.
And so what we really wanna focus on as a town is how do we spread out our demand
Amen.
so that we can be a year-round destination.
And amen. And so that's when you think about sporting goods. Well, do we need another ski shop here? Probably not. Thank you. I knew the answer to that question. But, you know, what about an outdoor outfitter? Like I mentioned before, there's opportunity for that here. Or, when we think even about restaurants, and I don't wanna dwell on that, but we think about what do we already have here right now? What's the niche that's not being met? That's where we have to understand, what that happens to be. So, let me get through the next few slides, and then we can continue to have this great conversation. The only thing I'll say about this is something two things that you already know. This is looking at employment in Beech Mountain and in the zip code. And I'll just say, when town proper, this might be a shock to you, but 73% of your jobs are accommodation, retail, and recreation, which is gonna be your ski resorts. Is that shocking to you? And then another shocking thing that might be shocking to you, which goes to your question just a second ago, your point, is 86% of our employees come from the outside. They have the community.
When we afford them,
That's-
when we can get them, when they can drive.
And
And they pass all the other restaurants and stores on the way.
right, so that's, that's something where housing, growing that year-round market here is really important. I'll just use as an analogy, real quick here. Is anybody, it's not too far away from us, is anybody familiar with Damascus, Virginia?
Yes.
Damascus, Virginia is about the same, it's a little bit bigger than you all in terms of population, barely. So for all intents and purposes, we'll say it's similar to you on size. It's different in every other way. They don't have a ski slope, but they do have significant visitor traffic with the trails that come through there. The AT Trail, but particularly the Virginia Creeper Trail. Their ski rental there is bike rental. So their businesses, they've got half of their businesses in downtown are great businesses. You can go and rent a really nice bike. They'll shuttle you up to the top of White Top Mountain, and you take this nice strolling 2-3 hour drive down into Damascus. I've done it recently. Going uphill would be a different story. I couldn't do that, but coming downhill, it's nice. But the point of that is, in that community, they've always struggled with seasonality because all of those businesses, again, stop me if you've heard this before, all of those businesses close up for the off season. And they go, the businesses close up shop and they go and vacation wherever they go on vacation or wherever their second home is, and they come back. Now, the difference here is their big peak of season is a lot longer than y'all's happens to be. It's flipped of y'all's. Their deadest time is in the winter. But the point of that is half of their downtown vaporizes in the off season. And it creates a challenge for the particularly restaurant type businesses to sustain themselves for 12 months. They've changed. They've evolved because they've been working on it for a really long time. They've tried to encourage and recruit people that live there longer. They've increased their marketing efforts from, say, Bristol to Abingdon to make sure people know what Damascus has to offer year round. And they've also brought in other types of businesses that sort of help create that critical mass. They've got a trail, businesses or activities. They got a trail center there, which is amazing. They've got a really small brewery that's smaller than this room that's really cool and successful, and he really focuses more to that regional market. Again, these may not be uses that y'all want in your community. They've got a distillery that's a major draw year round in that area. They started to get some higher end specialty shops because, again, there's that cluster of businesses and activities where people want to be there. It didn't happen overnight. We did a downtown plan for them with David. It's at least 10 years ago. And they've, I'd say in the last 3-4 years have really started to pass that point, cross that line of critical mass to where seasonality is still a challenge for them, but it wasn't like it was before. So anyway, that's employment. So
Where do they find their employees?
In Damascus, I mean, they're probably, I don't know, the region. I don't know. Washington County, Abingdon, Bristol, they're probably pulling from all that area. I think they're probably different than this right now, but if I recall correctly, they're about 800, 900 people. But they're also an older population too, like this community. I don't think they're 58 like this community is, but I mean, I don't know that. I can only make guesses where they get them.
And one guess, Aaron, think about this, the average income in Damascus.
Median age.
Eric's average, sorry.
I went over pretty fast.
It's a very different income, right? So a lot of the employees in Damascus can live in Damascus.
That's true. That's a good point.
Yeah. So very different.
Well, this last couple of slides, and then we can, like I said, continue the conversation. This is really interesting. We talked about this in the very first slide when I was talking about establishing that local trade area. This data is for people that come in our district. It doesn't matter if they live in town, it doesn't matter if they live in Banner Elk, it doesn't matter if they live in Florida, it doesn't matter if they live in Seattle. That's what you have here. This is that downtown market. And I won't go over the numbers again, but a couple of things I didn't mention before. One is 75, this is the whole year. 75 of the visitors that come into this district live greater than 75% live greater than 50 miles away. That is significant for you all, and that tells story. One of the other interesting things is, too, you can't read this, and that's okay, I'll get close so I can read it. This shows where they're coming from to come into our downtown commercial district and where they're going to after they leave our downtown district. And as you might imagine, over the course of the year, what do you think's the top? And I know you can read, but this is kind of tiny, so you might not be able to read it that well. Ski resort. Most people are coming into our district from the ski resort. When they're leaving our district, they're going to the ski resort. Next is home and work, so that's more of that local market. But it's interesting, outside of the ski resort, when we look at local businesses, again, where they're coming from and where they're going to over the last year, the Food Line. They stop in Food Line on their way to Beech Mountain. That kind of makes sense, right? Especially if they're staying overnight. Which I know that all of your skiers don't stay overnight. I know there's a lot of day skiers here. Restaurant downtown Banner Elk. They stop there maybe for lunch or on their way here. Now, where are they going to afterwards? Well, if they don't run out of gas, they're heading to the Exxon in Banner Elk.
Yeah.
And then they're going to restaurants in Banner Elk as well. So that's really interesting. Again, data tells a story. But here's the visitor trends over the course of the year. And this tells you everything you need to know about how our visitor season, how we are so seasonal. You know, we can see that during the summer months, we have a number of peaks. Each one of these peaks, by the way, is probably a weekend, I would guess. But, you know, people coming in, staying in their places, or traveling here and renting a place during the great, beautiful summer months. Those are our peaks. Then sort of September, October, it's a lot slower. Then once we get Christmas time, it just jacks up. It's crazy the amount of activity. And I'm pretty sure that this highest peak is probably MLK weekend, because I know in other ski places that's the biggest weekend of all. But you can see where the visitors are coming from.
Is that this last year, 2024?
This is from April 1st, 2024 to March of this year. So this piece is.
Yeah, that's why it's October.
Let's write Helene right there.
Yeah, that's right.
You know what? I can pull the same number for the previous year as well.
No, it's much higher.
Yeah, but you have higher
That was
in the fall for the leaves.
That's
than this year.
Okay.
And Christmas trees.
Thank you for asking that question. Because that's one of the things that was a head scratcher for me. And hold on, I'm gonna show you that here in a second, maybe the next slide, I think. But I do need to pull that number from the previous year, specifically for this guy right here. I got you, I hear you, and it is the next slide. So, we know there's 3 seasons or so. Ski season, summer season, leaf season. Now granted, there's two things There's 2 things that you know, this is an accordion, okay? This is 2.5 months, this is 2 months, this is 1 month. So it's a different period of time. The second thing is Helene. You know, we're right now on this. But we'll I'm so glad y'all brought that up, and this was this year. It's real data for this year. We'll get additional data to help us tell that story for last year, and it'll tell a more true picture of what that potential happens to be.
Definitely.
So visits during the ski season, I mentioned earlier, it was about 400 and change thousand people that came through our district. During the ski seasons, 226,000 unique zips. You see all that. North Carolina, Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina are highest. During our summer season, the visits, as you might imagine, you look at that chart that I showed on the previous slide with all the peaks, goes down to about just under 80,000 people. North Carolina, Florida, Tennessee pops in, so a little bit more of a regional penetration during the summertime, but still we're getting 20% of the folks we're getting during the summer are coming from Florida.
It's cooler.
Yeah, it's cooler. And y'all got a long history of being connected to that Florida market as well. There's probably people that have been coming here from Florida, they've been coming here for 40 years in the summertime. And then we have the leaf season, which I won't go into because we're gonna correct that number. But I'm glad that was brought up. Thanks, Walt. I mean, we talked about it, and I can get that data. I'm not gonna go into these, but we do have tourism reports. I did look at Beach. I looked at Banner Elk. You can see how their peaks are different in the lower right than y'all's happen to be. That's because they do have more of that critical mass of businesses. They probably have a larger population, that not in town proper, but in their trade areas. They do have a larger population in town proper, but there's an overlap too between y'all's trade areas, and those sorts of things.
October's low too.
Yeah, their October's down as well.
Wait, it's under.
Hey, next time you'll see more accurate data next time, but.
Oh, right, yeah.
But how awesome is it too, we've got this data set to where when we compare 2024 to 2025 and pull this data again in 2026, you've got this data set that says how much did that truly impact us during that season?
Just ask.
So we looked at Blowing Rock as well. And and then that's all the visitors. The only thing I'll say about this, there's a lot of numbers that are up here. Everything I've shown pretty much to this point was that more commercial core area district. When we look at the resort, the numbers are virtually identical to that area. And again, it's greater, so there were 484,000 visits during that time. But everybody's gotta come through the district anyway, right? So that makes sense that our district is showing very similar numbers in terms of visitors and activity to the resort.
Can I ask a quick question? Do you have the metrics on Blowing Rock like they did for Banner Oak? I'd love to see the difference, because they didn't get hit very bad.
Yes, you said Blowing Rock?
Blowing Rock.
Oh, hold on, I hit the wrong slide.
I just think it would be interesting to see.
Why are you doing this to me?
There it is. Look at theirs. They went down for a week.
They went down for a little bit.
They went down for.
Don't you love it when data confirms what you see? Yeah.
Well, we would hear that they were doing really well, and we're like, how?
And whereas if you looked at Spruce Pines, they probably flatlined, they're still flatlined.
Yeah.
Look at September 28th.
Isn't that amazing? That's pretty.
See, September 22nd.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's hurricane.
That's 28.
The thing is, nobody could get there because of the roads were all washed.
Really, really cool data. Well, that's all I have to share in terms of the market research. Yes, ma'am.
I appreciate that you said that you use conservative approach to these numbers. Does that conservatism include our accessibility? Because every place else we're talking about is flat.
Yeah.
You can go to Damascus from
Yeah, it's
different
a lot easier to
areas.
get to.
Absolutely. Do you include that in your analysis?
I mean, it's, on the data side, it's included because this is really what's happening in your community. From a vision side, absolutely it's included as well because we're looking at that infrastructure, we're looking at transportation, we're looking at water, we're looking at the whole 9 yards. But yeah, it's accounted for, but you're right, that's one thing that makes you different. I mean, a few weeks ago, Jonah and I were talking about how we love working in a community where the data tells a much different story and the challenges are different. And that's the case here in your community, and we love that because it allows us to be more creative and look at things a different way. But we know when we talk about, if I showed you data from Hilton Head, it's a resort community. I've done a really in-depth short-term rental market analysis in basic Louis, Mississippi. And I could have shown that to you, but it's irrelevant to your community, right? Even though they're a resort, well, they're a destination community.
I wanted to add something to what you said about it being flat, any place being flat. Start with an anecdote. So last night when we were roaming around trying to figure out how we could create, around the town hall, get over to the ski slope, we had to have dinner somewhere, and unfortunately it's the middle of the week before the weekend, so none of the restaurants are really open. But we started at the pizza place, then went to Whistle Pig. They had, I think the best food they had was a queso and chips or something like that. And
Chips.
And so we had to get in our car and drive to Bullwinkle's.
Right.
Because you don't walk to Bullwinkle's. Right. If it was walkable, you might. It's not that far away.
You can go to the Bear Root.
Probably a 10-minute walk.
That's the way David went. He went the Bear Route.
You went the Bear Route?
Oh, we went through the woods, yeah. He came through the woods.
I had to walk down the trail, so.
Yeah, he walked down through the woods. So, and then I was talking, Rick and I were kind of thinking about what was being presented here, and Rick brought it, he's an old urbanist, new urbanist like I am. Old new urbanist? Anyway, and so the retail, kind of the retail part of this, if it's like, if you really talk about like a real, like the kind of new urban brand, the walkability brand of retail, it's a lot different from suburbia, where you're actually shopping along the highway, and you're basically driving from one to the next, to the next, to the next, and there's a distance involved in that type of thing. And so when new urbanism and actually kind of rediscovered the Starling district and created places like Burkdale Village, it's like an apples to oranges comparison between
shopping in the suburbs, because everything is a park once. Like Burkeville Village is a park once, Blowing Rock's a park once, West Jefferson's a park once, and so the retail, yes, it may not be possible if you have to get in your car and drive from one to the other up here, but if you create a strolling district, these numbers probably are extremely valid, that's what I would think. So if you do this model, everything's in the park once location, and it's flat, where we're talking
Yeah,
about.
but they have to get up here, and there's a certain number of that population in this area that you're looking at
Right.
that will not drive up here. I
Well,
mean, we
they're
are a
coming
party
now.
bunch.
Yeah, the cars are coming. And that's the great thing about a ski slope. They come up here because that's how you have to ski.
Yeah.
And then once they're here, they park once, and then the shops, and then they basically do one more. So,
Hey, Tom, Highlands, North Carolina.
pardon me?
Highlands, North Carolina.
Highlands is another, and that one actually, slopes.
Would you mind putting, this is actually a comment, if that's okay, but can we look at the Blowing Rock slide again?
wants to see it.
Aaron? did you-
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was looking at where it was, there we go.
There's some, when we talk, for me, so this slide right here has actually kind of brought everything together to the point you made earlier about kind of like stores and how it works. And to me, it's shocking to see how much April, May, June business there is. And if you kind of look, the year's flat. And to the point of kind of like, how do you support restaurants? Once, it seems like what you're saying is, once you reach that critical mass, the beauty is that it flattens out the tourism. And, we kind of look at like, oh, we have a peak season in December, that's great, we can pile people in. And that almost makes it feel like a disadvantage when they leave. But they don't have the advantage of a ski season. There's no bump that you would say, oh, there is December, January, like we have.
Right.
And so that flatness to me is actually kind of blew my mind to see that they're April, May.
They powered through COVID, right?
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, this is all just one year, but
But don't forget
it's something
that.
where,
Don't forget
I mean, not
that.
COVID, they powered through Helene, they powered through Helene.
The higher points aren't
That
because
part.
of the ski seasons there.
they aren't because of it, yeah.
Yeah, because of Appalachian Ski Resort.
But there aren't higher points there. If you look at,
If you look at, basically,
The December,
December.
but if you
December,
compare,
November,
but flip
because
that.
they open up,
Yeah, but flip
because they
that,
have more blowing season capability.
oh, it's right there, yeah, so look at Beech Mountain though in the top left.
We're colder than they are.
Yeah, but they can blow more faster.
Yeah.
They
I
have.
So, I guess what point I'm trying to make
Now
is,
we are.
Banner Elk, Blowing Rock on the bottom, forget about Helene, are basically flat. Beech Mountain is like low, super high, and then back down.
Yeah.
And I think that town that they're talking about, the extra restaurants, the walkability, lifts the rest more in line. And I think that that's where it then makes it possible for 5 restaurants to succeed.
One thing too, when we run these numbers, that just occurred to me, it's not just, this time of year where our, Helene impacted us, but I bet the total number, even in the ski season, probably was impacted a little by Helene as well.
The roads,
But I can-
there were roads closed.
Right, roads closed, and probably people think, honestly, I'm just not gonna go up there because either I don't feel like I can, or I just wanna get in the way. And,
You still can't go on 321 and come up that way. That road's still
so when we run the numbers from 2024, it might actually show more total numbers, okay? Even in our peak seasons, it might show more higher peaks. But who knows? It'll be interesting too to see, because the first 10 months of this line here wasn't impacted by Helene at all. So it'll be interesting to see, well, is that the same in 2024? You would think that it'd probably be very, very similar until you get to October.
Aaron, these charts, it'd be best if they could be redrawn so that the x-axis is exactly the same for every one of them. This x-axis is 10,000, and that is 70,000. See? So they're totally different scales. So you can't really visually compare them. Because the
I think the visualization actually does still tell a story, but your point is well taken. on that.
No, see, everything.
No, I understand what you're saying,
See,
right?
this is 10,000 right
No,
here.
I understand.
And that's 10,000.
I got it.
at the top.
I understand.
I think the other day, how many days are
Well, yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to throw another super thought. With growing retail, we have to think about the deliverability of the goods. While you guys were in your traffic meeting yesterday, there was a semi stuck on.
We heard about that. We heard about that.
So that's why we don't have a big furniture store. You can't mass produce in. So when you're looking at, oh, these things would be great, how do we get those products?
Yeah, that's a good
Absolutely.
point. It's a very good point. And this has been a challenge for the walkable scale that we do stuff, because everything is more intimate. The streets are narrow, the alleys are narrow. And so what happens is this, you know, Cisco is the big food delivery, you know, big institutional food delivery. Cisco in Charlotte, they were actually, they deliver everywhere, okay? And so they were in my neighborhood in Myers Park, and they were delivering to the Duke Mansion, which is like this really nice destination venue. And they had a small box truck. I was like, oh, look, it's usually some monster. When they come to Vermillion, which is our 100, they bring the huge beer truck down there, and it actually makes it around the square and delivered to the corner. But basically, I said, so I went to talk to the Cisco guy, and I said, how do y'all do this? Like, you know, to bring a small truck here? He said, oh yeah, we have 70 trucks, and like 11 of them are smaller trucks. And so when we plan out our route, we use a smaller truck for all the old in-town neighborhoods and main streets, because that's what, you know, that's the way how we get in to deliver. So that's one thing. And, you know, and like the lumber companies do the same thing, they have a smaller truck. So it's one thing that, this is what you need to do, you know, as a town officially, is basically work with all these delivery people and say, we want you to use your smaller truck here. You know you've got one, just make sure that's the one you send. Because they just will say, oh, they'll just not think about it. That's what you tell them. The other thing that happens are public services like the fire trucks and the garbage trucks. No, that's right, you have the parade and everything. And then you have street, I don't know, you don't have that now, but street cleaners. And basically, the fire chiefs love buying the largest, for a long time, they would just buy the biggest trucks that were available because it was kind of status, you know. And then in some places they realized, well, that doesn't fit. I don't think y'all did that here because you've got good sized trucks, right? But you can negotiate the rest.
By four-wheel drive,
Yeah, exactly. So you calibrate, that's what I'm saying, is you calibrate your transportation and delivery services to the scale of your community. And then you have to go out, and you have to coordinate it though. And they're like these, like in some of our little kind of compact villages, you know, everything has gotten down to the scale of golf carts. You know, I mean, like, you know, it's like people are going from big cars down to golf carts now, like the mayor, as is. Y'all probably see it all the time, all the time. And so, so that's the kind of thing, you think of scale. But yeah, it's kind of like the next evolution. You have to really deal with that. You ever heard about the big truck?
The size of the trucks.
Oh yeah, and he's a pro at this. Yeah.
The size of the truck often depends on the length of the route. If McDonald's is sending a truck out, and they're in a really thinly populated area, then you have to get a really big truck so they can go a long distance to make it in one day. You see, if you have a lot of McDonald's in a really concentrated place, they can send a smaller truck and make the loop back to the warehouse. Some places even have breakdown distribution places where you bring a big truck in, offload, and they load it to small trucks, and then they run around the neighborhood. So you can work it a couple of ways. If somebody can write down on a Post-it the location of that place where the semi got stuck, I need to know that.
Yeah, but you got, that was unusual.
Which type?
It was a Tyson food truck.
Yeah.
We don't sell Tyson food. The guy at the bottom of the mountain was just paying attention to GPS.
Oh.
And if you you have a sign saying something that doesn't always work. So he probably was speaking a foreign language. He didn't know, he couldn't read. We've had a big sign down there saying, no semis allowed, but they took it away 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, they did.
So that poor guy came up. That's what
Yeah, it's just like they used to bring you up to Andy Hicks right to your house.
Semis come in all sizes.
They do.
They all the way down to double bottoms for very flat states in the interstate. So they've been growing and growing. We can limit the size of the
We appreciate your time. What's next on our calendar?
Okay, sorry, I'm back up. Master of Ceremonies here. We're taking a little bit of a lunch break, so, and then next up will be, I believe, zoning and regulatory review, and that'll be this afternoon. Time is, what? At 2 o'clock. So, if that interests you, feel free to come in.
What about tomorrow? What time?
Just a review.
Review at what time?
11. It's on the town's website.
So you said you can quote me and back or change, so
Okay.